This is Join Us in France, episode 239. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is the podcast where you'll hear pragmatic advice for your next trip to France. Or in this instance, maybe it'll be inspiration for your next big purchase. On today's episode, Anthony Slayton shares how he bought a house in southern France in preparation for his retirement. He saw a great opportunity and jumped on it. We'll talk about the oddities of the French realtor system and the French realty market and how he managed, despite it all, to buy a house in 1 week. Amazing. Show notes and photos for this episode are on joinusinfrance.com/239, although photos are hard to come by because there aren't a lot of houses for sale around my neighborhood. I drove around last night. I could hardly find any. And also for reasons that we explain in the episode, realtors are not real keen on putting on a big sign that says this house is for sale. I bet you wonder why. Well, we'll explain. Slayton, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Bonjour, Annie.
How are you today?
We are doing good today.
Excellent. So you are actually in France, in your home in France today?
Yes, we arrived a few days ago.
Excellent. And you found everything in good order?
Yes, everything was in great order. My wife she's funny. We rented out on Airbnb when we are not here, and there were 2 or 3 things out of place. And so I had to explain to her that's the nature of the beast.
Right.
Every year.
Right. Yeah. Of course. Okay. So let's dial it back a little bit and explain why you have this house in France.
Well, I started working for a company who does business with Airbus, so I would come to France about 10 years ago. And at one point, I spent 5 months working here in France, so I fell in love with France. We had the opportunity to buy our retirement home early, and so we were looking around for a place, and we decided upon the southwest of France because that's where I decided I wanted to retire.
But by then, if you're truly retired, you won't need to go to Airbus very much.
True, but with my job, I'd had the luxury of traveling most of the northern hemisphere, and so I had already settled upon 2 locations in the world. One was the southwest of France, and the other one was Vancouver Island. I would never have $1 million to buy a house on Vancouver Island.
I know. The prices are pretty high over there, aren't they?
We can thank the Chinese.
Is that right?
They have driven people, Canadians, out of the housing market around the Vancouver area and the Vancouver Island area around Victoria. And that was just when I went out there and fell in love with that area but then I realized the housing prices there. It was just out of my reach.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, the Chinese have not discovered the southwest of France yet.
Only for the housing prices, yes, I would agree with that.
Yes. I mean, there are people in France who complain that we have too many English and Americans who buy houses here and that it raises the prices a little bit, but it's nothing like that yet. So that's good.
It's nothing like what's going on up there.
Right.
It's shocking. But because of that, we chose the Southwest because the other area we were priced out of it. And then we decided that instead of coming over here and searching for the perfect house, that we would instead decide upon where we wanted to live, narrow it down, and then we would just find a house in that area. And so we identified, for us, instead of running around and finding, since this was going to be where we're going to retire, we want to be very careful about selecting the village or the area. We wanted everything within walking distance. We wanted a hospital. We wanted dentists and doctors.
Sure.
We wanted schools. So even though we should not have children when we come over here full time living with us, but we thought that a school would provide a vibrant.
Yeah.
Community has a school. It has a vibrant. It's not retirees only. It's
Right.
actual functioning society. Functioning community.
Right.
We wanted a rail link. We wanted a boulangerie, a patisserie, a boucherie.
You like to eat, huh?
Yeah, we do. We enjoy. I actually yesterday bought a full leg of ham leg.
Wow.
On all summer long. Anyway, and
the cured ham.
Yes, the cured ham. That chemical stand that you shave off.
Yes, those tempt me all the time, but I'm trying not to eat meat. So
this is the first time I actually broke down and bought one of them because they are very tempting.
Yes.
Very tempting. But we came up with about, I want to say 10, 15 things and then we went online, and I knew that, but based upon having been in Toulouse region, I knew that the Department de Aude, which is, the next department over, that it was in the U.S., it's the equivalent of crossing the railroad tracks.
Right, it's pretty close.
Yeah, it's really close, but the prices and the experience, you're no longer in the large city. You're now in the rural area.
Right.
The housing prices dropped substantially just by leaving the. I have trouble pronouncing it every time. The Haute-Garonne.
La Haute-Garonne. Yes, Haute-Garonne is where Toulouse is, and right next to us, to the east of us, is l'Aude. That's Aude is where Carcassonne is. That's the biggest town. But Quillon, where you are, is also a good-sized city. Yeah,
it's about 4,000 people, I think, with about 400 Brits, Americans, and Australians in it.
So that's a lot.
We were surprised. That was not an intent of ours. Nowhere on our list was a large English-speaking community.
Right.
But for our purposes, we were very lucky in finding one that had a large English-speaking community because we don't speak French. I'm even though I'm a professional, I'm dyslexic. So learning French has just been. I've been at it now for a decade, and I still speak like a 3-year-old child. And
yet you manage.
I survive. I survive. Only out of pure necessity and desire.
Yeah.
If it's the lady who sells us our croissants in the morning will tell you I cannot speak French at all.
Okay, so let's explain a little bit. First of all, this was a cash purchase.
Yes, ma'am.
So you didn't have to worry about finding a loan and applying for all of these loan type things. So that makes it easier.
Right. We probably would not be doing it if we had to borrow. If we would have had to borrow any money and gone through the banking system, it would have just been too daunting for us.
Yeah.
And we would have then waited until we came over here if we were going to do that.
Yeah.
But since we had the cash on hand, based upon some inheritance monies, we decided to go ahead and we actually decided that investing in a house in France that we could then put on Airbnb and recoup the annual operating costs from that.
Yeah.
Made good financial sense for us since that's what we would have done with the money in a bank account anyway.
Right.
And so usually I've always heard people say the best time to buy a house is 20 years ago. And so we thought, well, if the best time to buy our retirement house is 10 years before we need it, that sounds like a good idea to us.
Yeah.
We got lucky and the Brexit helped us out financially substantially. Because it reduced down the euro to the U.S. dollar rate. So we received anyway.
so it felt like a lot more euros than you should get if the exchange rate was the normal average.
Right. When we bought the house, the exchange rate was $1.10 to the euro. Mm-hmm. And where it's normally, I think right now it's about $1.20, $22.
Exactly. It's usually between 20, 25, something like that.
Yeah. And I've seen it in 2008, I saw it up to $1.60 before.
Yes. That's when we moved. We moved in 2005, and we had the equity from the sale of our house in the U.S., and we were told to that we. Well, we're not financiers by any means, and so we probably made some mistakes. But what we did is we put it in an account in dollars, but in a French bank, in an account in dollars. But when we needed to use that money to buy a house, I think we were at 152 or 153. It was terrible. It was really bad. For a few years there, around 2004 through 2007, 2008, the dollar was just not doing very well against the euro, and you needed a lot of dollars to buy a euro.
Yes.
Yeah, it's gotten better.
Vacations in those days were challenging.
Yeah. Definitely.
But luckily for us, at least, not so much for you, but for us, when we bought our house, the dollar to the euro was very strong.
Yeah.
So, and that was one of the reasons we decided to do it, was because we felt that we would never make that money up in the retirement account sitting in the U.S. if the euro went back to its natural, rate. And it's already gone up 15-20% in the 3 years we've had it. So we feel like vindicated in our decision. But,
right. And also financially, I mean, buying a house in France, especially in a town that's 5,000 to 10,000, it's probably going to hold up its value quite well, if not go up in price.
Our house has gone up. I checked it recently. A friend of mine's not a realtor, not an estate agent, but in the French, the word is
notaire.
No. The real estate agent, the guy who actually arranges the sale.
Agent immobilier.
Yeah, immobilier. Yes.
Yeah, agent immobilier. Okay.
I had a what we call in the U.S. Anyway, I could not think of the word. I had him look, and our house has gone up a little bit since then, primarily because the British people are no longer afraid of they're not all rushing to. When we bought, all the British people had put their houses on the market because they were afraid they would not be able to stay in France. That's ended now, so the housing market here is stabilized to the good. Because a lot of houses have come off the market, so we were lucky in that sense as well. But there's enough turnover here that if we were wanted to sell, we'd be able to.
Sure.
About a year probably, but we don't ever plan on doing that.
Yeah. So in France, typically the housing market, I mean, it varies greatly depending on where you want to buy. I was just reading in the news the other day that in Paris, a square meter of property is going to run you minimum 8,000 euros per square meter. And that's anywhere in Paris. That's the cheapest place in Paris.
That's amazing.
That's ridiculous. I'm like, why would you want to live there? Like, it's, I mean, yeah, you would work just to buy a house. That's it. You wouldn't eat. You wouldn't have any recreation. It's like work nonstop just to buy the house. It's ridiculous. So for most people, anyway. So yeah, it's very expensive. So you have Paris, where the cheapest place in Paris is 8,000 more or less per square meter, and then you have Toulouse city, where things are not near as expensive, but it's around 3,000 to 3,500 per square meter, depending on how desirable, where it's located, all that. But as soon as you go out a little bit, then it's 2,500, 2,200, and the further away you get, the less you have to pay. So. That's why if you can find a place that's a sweet spot, that has everything you need, but not the high prices, you're a very happy camper.
Exactly. It has been. I could not. That price just leaves me speechless compared to what we got for what we bought.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the house we have. I honestly do not know the square footage, but it has 5 bedrooms, 2 living rooms, a kitchen with a combined kitchen and dining room. And then one of the bedrooms is an efficiency apartment that has a small kitchen in it and a bathroom attached. and then our house is on the river with a balcony overlooking the river.
So it's pretty.
Yeah, it's just, and we're 8 doors off the square in town.
Yeah.
It's just, and it's 4 stories tall. It's a village house. But I cannot imagine paying. That just leaves me speechless.
Yeah.
Those prices here. I mean, this house is extremely affordable compared.
Yeah. No, it's. I mean, I understand why people want to live in Paris. If that's where their job is, then definitely. But you just like that's still a lot more money than most other places in France. So anyway.
But I could not have bought this house for the price of an apartment in Toulouse. When we looked at the prices for this house, and there's probably 10 or 15 houses to choose from in our area, there was no comparable houses or apartments in Toulouse to choose from for that same price point.
Yeah, and these things go up and down. So a place is going to get popular, and I mean, Provence used to be just like Quillan. So a lot of 50 years ago, all these little towns in Provence were not that expensive. And then some English guy wrote a book that became a bestseller, and then everybody and their dogs wanted to go pay whatever to get a house in Provence or get some old crumbling buildings so they could write a book about renovating it. And you're like, oh, geez, that hurts. And the locals, they have to. That's why for locals it's not so good, because then their kids can't buy a house next door either.
Oh, I don't know how families do it in Provence.
Yeah.
It feels unfortunate. That's one of the things I like about this area is I feel like other than Quillan itself, you are immersed in the French culture.
Yeah.
And it is farmers. It is the people who work here in town, who you see, in the cafes and everywhere. A friend of mine who I was talking to last night I asked him, we were talking about goat cheese and the little shepherd in town who comes and sells his goat cheese. And he was mentioning how he can't go to the market on Saturday because he knows everybody. So he can't get through the market and do his shopping.
Because he's talking to everybody.
I'm like, well, that's awfully nice.
Yeah. There's worse fates in life.
Yes, there are far worse fates in life.
Yeah. So, sorry.
Go ahead.
So I just wanted to get back to basics. So you picked an area. You picked the southwest of France. Then you picked a house that met certain criteria.
Yes, ma'am.
And then you went looking. How long did you look?
Well, we had a very specific area. We were buying within the old city of Quillan. We were not even buying outside the old walled city of Quillan, even though the walls are now gone.
Right.
It's an oblong shape, very small center part of the city. We only had probably 10 or 15 houses to choose from in our entire experience. So knowing that, I scheduled a week to come over here. So I left my wife and my 2 kids in the U.S. A friend agreed to come because the kids were in school. It was in September. So we came over here, got an Airbnb, and then I spent the next week looking at houses. It was a little problematic for me at first because in the U.S., the buyer hires a realtor, and the realtor then arranges for them to see all the houses.
Yeah. Where
here in France, I did not know that. So when I went to my first realtor and I picked the realtor, they showed me the 2 houses they had. And then when I asked them to show me other houses, because of and this was a British lady who I was working with, and because she was British and could speak and we could really communicate very well, but there was this barrier between us that she did not fully understand what I was asking, because in Britain, apparently they do it the same way as in France, where the realtor represents the seller and actually the house even more so, and they don't represent other people's houses.
Right.
And so when I asked her to show me the other houses, she didn't really. understand the American approach.
Right.
And so I wasted a day and a half waiting on her to make all these arrangements for me, that now I realize there's no way she was not going to do that, because she'd be selling someone else's house.
Right. So the way it works in France is that people can list their house with as many realtors as they want to. And as a matter of fact, most people start out by trying to sell it themselves, so sell by owner. And if that doesn't work, they will go to one realtor, and then to two realtors, and then to three realtors. And usually the ones that are listed everywhere, it's because the owners did not set the price realistically. It's too high, or maybe it would be okay if the house was in great shape, but the house is not in great shape, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so you have houses that sit on the market for a long, long time because the sellers are not very, very realistic. And as a realtor, you can't argue with these people, because if they tell you, I want to sell my house for €1 million, and you know that the house is not worth near that, well, if you try to talk them down too much, they're just going to say, well, you're a lousy realtor and you won't get that kind of money for me, so bye-bye. Yeah. And so then realtors have to agree with the owners that, yes, maybe we can sell it for X amount of money, even if they know it's not going to sell. And then when an American buyer comes around, they go, "Oh, this guy's an American. He probably has oodles of money. So we are just going to show him all the houses." So you tell them, "I want a house with 2 bathrooms," and they show you 3 houses with 1 bathroom. And you're like, what part of 2 bathrooms was so difficult? But it's not that they don't want to work with you. It's just that they don't have a house that has 2 bathrooms. So they'll show you the house that they can show you.
That's exactly what happened to me. We specifically requested older, ancient, 19th century. We wanted an older house, and the realtor was showing us buildings made in the 1950s because that's what they had.
Right.
And it took me a while to figure out and they were showing me houses outside the center of the city, and they were and I couldn't, because we had done the research on a website called rightmoveuk.com, or UK, and you could and it puts all the house listings that the realtors have put online for their own websites. They will collect all of them together and put them in one place, and then you go to Right Move UK, and there's all the houses.
That's good.
And so we knew that we wanted to see this house and this house and this house.
But then you had to figure out who was listing it.
And that was the issue we ran into, is we didn't fully grasp who was listing them. And then, was that realtor available the day to show me the house that I wanted to be able to see it, based upon me scheduling with another realtor and all those things.
No, it's complicated. Yeah, especially when you want to go fast.
When you have 4 days to do it. And eventually one of the realtors admitted to me that she was so used to buyers from the U.S. or the U.K. showing up and wanting to see houses we're thinking about someday buying a house.
Right.
That she really didn't understand that I had a check in my pocket. I was going to buy the house this week.
Right.
I was going to put the offer in, and we would do, but this was not a game I was playing.
Right.
And I only knew that because I met her in the, went over and talked to her one day in the cafe. As we were having coffee, we started talking, and she was like, "Oh, did you buy a house?" I was like, "Yeah, I bought a house the day after I talked to you."
Wow.
I'm like, "No, I was serious. I was leaving for a house."
She must have been like, "Dang it."
I know. She's like, I sort of, so that was sort of a funny thing, was and then she said, well, most people show up and they ask them where they want to buy, and they say, well, maybe, the coast. And she's like, oh, I was at, I was, Keon or Lamu, or Burnack, but so and those are all near places really close by.
Right. No, but it's true. People don't know what they want. And I think that's a huge difference between what you did and what most people do. You knew exactly what you wanted. You had it narrowed down to one one region of France and then one town. And then you knew you wanted city center, which is smart because it's prettier. And, you knew what you wanted. But it's hard for the realtor to ascertain, is this guy for real?
Yes. Yes, it was rather humorous between the realtors who I had the one realtor who didn't understand what I was after, and I couldn't understand what she was saying, so it was a mutual confusion.
Yeah.
I had the other realtor who sort of blew me off and showed me a house in passing, and when I asked to see another one, she couldn't find the key to it, and she didn't really try that hard.
Yeah.
And then the last realtor who, when I walked into her office on the last day I was here, and was like, I want to see that house that you have listed because I've got to buy a house today, and I'm going to look at one other house I found online, and I'm going to buy this house or that house today. Because one of our rules was we were not going to do a remodel job. We were not into this, we're going to buy a ruin and spend all this time.
Yeah.
I was not going to write a story. I was not going to try to do that.
Right. You're not in for the book.
Yeah, that was not what was going on. I wanted to buy a house I could enjoy on my summers now and then retire in with as little work as possible. And so there were two houses I had not seen on the last day. And by that point, I'd sort of figured out what to do. And I walked in and said, I am buying a house today. I want to see a house. I want to see this house. Can you take me there now?
I bet that realtor had never heard that before, and she will probably never hear it again.
But it got her attention for my purpose. And that was what I needed, was I needed their attention.
Mm-hmm.
I did have to wait around for one of the realtors to get an English speaker to take me because that was my one. I could not overcome that barrier. Right. And then luckily I found my house, it was made sometime between 1100s and the 1500s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's been a house there that long. It's just that it got remodeled and added on and this and that and that.
Actually, this one really hasn't that much. It has bathrooms, but not. I still have the stone walls and everything. It's
cool.
I am very, very. It has a new floor in the first floor, but I was very lucky to find a very ancient. When you come in the door of the front house, and you can only find this in France. You can't find. I don't think you can really find this. It's difficult to find anywhere. This is even difficult to find in France, but we found one that had a medieval linteled entryway for a village house, because most of the villages, the houses were updated as the villages, over time. People would, just as they do today, they remodel. For whatever reason, this house, other than it has the traditional stucco front on it, but the back still has the post and beam back. And the doorway was never the doorway you come into was never modified, so it still has the 3 stone lintels. So a stone on each side of the doorway, then a stone going across the lintel. And we had no idea how old that was until we saw a place in Mirepoix, which is a medieval town nearby here, that had that had a doorway that was very similar to ours. And it was dated 1400, I think.
Wow.
So we were like, oh, my, the Americans. Oh, my God, that's older than before.
No, that's great. It looks like you lucked out. For somebody who was trying to go fast, you lucked out because, houses like that, they don't come up for sale every day. We were. The funny story about this is I refused to view this house when we were in the first couple of days. I would not come and look at this house because the photographs online of the house were so bad. The room that now I absolutely love and adore because it is ancient posts with stones stacked in between them and lime mortar. Look like 2x4s and insulation on the picture. Wow.
It literally was. It was like this dark room, and you could see what looked like 2x4s or stripping, and it looked like the room was unfinished. And I don't want an unfinished house. Mm-hmm. And then out of desperation, I came and looked at it and fell in love with it because it wasn't insulation; it was stone set in lime mortar.
Right.
That was so far from my reality that I could not adjust to it until I saw it.
Right. Oh, and
then had a bathroom. I was ecstatic.
Mm-hmm. So the thing is, in France, realtors don't try as hard, I think, to sell your house as they do in the U.S. Yeah. In the U.S., I've had friends who sold their houses after hours, and they say, "Oh, by now they send a consultant to above a certain price." They'll send a consultant that will tell you, paint this wall, do this, change this light fixture, blah blah blah, do all these things. Here, they don't even turn the lights on. Sometimes you go visit a house, the owners hasn't even left. The owners hasn't cleared up the dishes. I kid you not. I visited a lot of houses before we bought ours, and it was just, I was like, you guys should try a little harder because it could be nice, but you're not putting it in its best light or anything.
Oh, I would agree with that completely from what I saw. I went into houses beforehand where if they had spent about 5,000 euros doing some basic repairs, I might have bought that house and never even come to the one I ended up buying.
Right.
But one of them had a hole in the ceiling that they replaced the roof, but they hadn't replaced where the roof had leaked into the room.
Wow.
And so you had this plaster falling down and a hole, and I'm like, you did the hard work, but you're not willing to do that work.
Yeah.
And now you're scaring me off because I don't want any repairs.
Right.
It was very strange to me, the simple hands-off approach of the entire process.
Yeah.
Of everybody except for the notary. The notary did not take a hands-off approach. We used a very well-versed English-speaking notary, and it was fascinating to me because he had a digital TV or a large screen television behind his desk that he put all the papers up on, so you could view. In this little tiny town in rural France, he was more modern than any attorney or closing agent I had ever seen in the U.S. I was so impressed with him.
Right. And they do that typically because they want everybody in the room to read the same documents. And so they will, by law, they have to go down the whole document and tell you and make sure you understand and agree and all of that. And so they just wanted to do it just once, point once, and all of them get it. Well, probably it was just you and your wife, but
it was just me actually at that point because she was arriving the next day because of airline tickets and
Mm-hmm.
And so I had her power, what we would call her power of attorney.
Right.
But it was fascinating, and one thing that surprised me was I'm an attorney by profession, and I actually did closings in the U.S. in the past. And we would do an attorney's opinion in the U.S. In some states, you do an attorney's opinion where you would go off and you would read the abstract, and then you would just tell the person the pertinent information in your letter, knowing full well that unless there was any reservations taken, the person would never even see your letter. Where here in France, I had to sit for about 45 minutes as he laid out the known history of the house to me. Right.
They have to. They have to disclose all of that.
It was fascinating and very different. As in the U.S., from the seller's perspective, I come in, or the buyer's perspective, I come in, I sign my mortgage, and I get everything else. Where here, the buyer I felt much more protected by the system, if that makes sense.
Yes, because what happens, especially, yours is a village house, a city house. But mine it's like 200 meters from the school, but it's still, we have this kind of right-of-way complication. And a lot of houses in France have that. And so they have to make sure you understand exactly what you can and cannot do with this right of way, and what your neighbors can and cannot do with this right of way. And so that part took half an hour.
Yes.
So
it's the American says, well, this is silly. I don't need to spend all this time and money. But then the attorney in me says, I like that system better because it tells everybody up front before they do anything, everything they need to know.
Yeah. No, it's good. So did you find, because it was a cash purchase, the bank complication was out of the way. But did you find the paperwork was particularly difficult, or was it pretty straightforward for someone like you that has experience?
I was again, I go back to the fact that, and I can't remember the gentleman's name right now, but he was, because he was so good at his job, and he didn't know what I did in the U.S. So in my previous life, before I went to work for the company I work for now, so I would look at the documents that we would be receiving in the mail, and between Google Translate and between his English versions of them. It was actually very reassuring to me to get the documents, to see that they were doing the property inspections as a matter of course, to see that I was getting earthquake or geological reports that had been prepared.
Or flood zones or things like that.
Everything. That in the U.S., they only apply in very unique situations, where here they're for every sale. And the electrical report and everything. So I did discover that there were 2 or 3 small little issues with the house that I otherwise would not have, but I didn't care about them by that point. I'd done the terrible thing that a buyer would always do, which is they fall in love with the house.
Yeah.
By that point, I'd come to understand what I was buying. I'd come to understand how lucky I was to have found it when I found it.
Yeah.
I'd come to understand how lucky that I was on the price. I'd come to understand so that I was going to ignore the fact that the heating system was that I did not realize until I saw it. The heating system for the house is only one wood stove in the dining room. Otherwise, it's space heaters, and if you plug more than 3 in, they blow the circuit.
Yeah.
But I knew that before I bought the house.
Okay.
And that was something different that would have happened in the U.S.
Yeah.
So I respected the fact that now I had to read the reports, and I had to understand what the reports were saying by the information within them about the electricity and the voltage and all that.
Yeah.
So I had to sit down with my wife and go, you need to understand something. We're only going to be there in the summertime for 2 or 3 months a year until we retire. And when we retire, we may have to do something different.
Yeah.
We may have to upgrade the electrical system in 10 years to be able to put heaters in each room, if that's what we want. But the other side of the coin is the house is centuries old. No one else has ever thought the need to do this. Instead of taking the American approach, let's just see what happens.
Right.
And we've been pleasantly surprised. We've been here spent one Christmas here. The kids made us promise never to come back to France in the Christmas time. But we spent one Christmas here, and it took a day and a half to heat up the house. But it heated up that one stove heated up the house very nicely, and we probably won't upgrade it like we had originally planned because it actually works.
Yeah. So in France we have lots of different types of heating, but a lot of houses will come with pretty basic heating systems compared to what we had. I lived in Utah, so you get cold winters, and you have a massive furnace and also massive carrier air conditioners outside, to make it livable. Otherwise, in the desert, in a high plain desert like that, it's not good. You need those things.
We live in Iowa, and it got down to minus 27 Fahrenheit this winter.
Yeah, there you go.
And when it's that cold, and our house in the U.S. is built in the 1850s with 18-inch brick walls, there's no way you can heat a house when the cold is seeping in through the walls.
Yeah. That's very, very cold. Yeah, you're not likely to have that.
Yeah, that was our frame of reference when we looked at this house. So now we've been pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
We're learning to live with France instead of importing our American ways, if that makes sense.
Yes, because when I bought the house we bought, at first I was thinking, okay, I would like a duct system, a duct heating system. And I did find one company that did that, but it was an arm and a leg, and clearly they weren't really, they were trying to establish this, but they mostly sold it for kind of warehouses, commercial stuff, yeah. And they were like, what is it with this woman? Why does she want that? But it was so comfortable to me in Utah, I thought, well, this is the way to go. And then we didn't do anything the first few years. And then eventually we found a French system, a very French system that works great. And it does both cooling and heating. And it's based in each room. So each room has its own settings. So you can have the office be quite cool, but the bedroom is not so much. I mean, but you can do anything you want. It's very flexible, and I really like that better by now. But at first, I was like, what is this system? What are they doing?
In the U.S., they call them mini splits. They are starting to become very, very, very utilized. And I have some rental properties, and one of our houses in the rental properties, we actually installed mini splits because it was the most economical way to not to install, but to continue to keep the house warm and cold.
Yeah.
It was the most economical way for us to do it because it was a small house.
And also so if you want to keep your office at a certain temperature, you can do that, and you don't have to cool the rest of the house. You can just cool the rooms when you need them.
Yeah,
it's very good. I'm in love with this thing.
They are. I stayed in. We went to not Sicily. Naples last year for our once we're over here, we usually take one little small week trip, and we went to Naples, and the place we stayed in the south of Naples had each bedroom had one, and then the main room had one.
Yeah.
And they were nice.
Yeah, it works really well. And our neighbor, when I walked home earlier, I saw that my neighbor is getting one installed. So I was like, finally, you got wise. You got tired of getting too hot in the summer. Anyway.
Yes.
Anyway.
They are very nice. I will tell you that the other thing that I think people need to realize is the cost of furniture in France for new furniture. We because our house is so old, we furnished it with from Brocantes, Emasses, which is the equivalent of a Catholic charity that supports homeless people.
Oh, Emmaüs, yes, Emmaüs.
How do you say that?
Emmaüs.
Emmaüs. We always say Emmaus, but Emmaüs.
Yes.
Yeah, I have to say that correctly. But we and Grenier. Anyway, garage sales.
Vide-grenier, yes.
Yeah, vide-greniers. We utilize those to buy our furniture.
Yeah.
Now, it took us 2.5 years to furnish our house during summers.
Because you had to go around and find something that fit.
We had to, and we made the decision we wanted older pieces to match the house. And that made it a little bit more challenging, but financially, it actually helped us out a lot because the most expensive piece of furniture we have in the house was an IKEA couch that we bought for my son's the efficiency apartment in the top of the house. It's an old attic that got converted in the 90s, so it looks IKEA-esque to begin with. So putting an IKEA couch up there
was fine,
perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But it was the most expensive piece of furniture we bought was this IKEA couch because. I don't know why, but used furniture is extremely cheap in France from my perspective compared to what in the US.
If you go to Emmaüs or, what's the name of the other one? It's not going to come back to me. But there's another one just like Emmaüs where you just donate.
Oh, Pushimon.
What? Say that.
Pushimon?
Spell it.
Oh, you're going to get me to line now. Pushimon. It's in Limoux. Poshimon. I'm trying to find it on the map as I'm sitting at my computer.
Yeah, because that might be a local thing. I don't recognize this.
Limoux, Leclerc.
Anyway, the places in France where you would find old furniture, like this secondhand furniture, is Le Bon Coin.
Oh, yes. We've used them as well.
Le Bon Coin, so that's online, and it's like a permanent yard sale, but online. But then, of course, you have to deal with shipping. Or if it's close enough, you could restrict it to around you, and then you could go pick it up. So that's a good way to do it. Or you have Emmaüs, or you have... What's the other one? I can't... Emmaüs. Google.
The one that I was saying was LE... and then a space, and then PARCHEMIN.
Okay, PARCH...
EMIN.
Le Parchemin.
Parchemin.
I have never heard of it, but I see there's one in Limoux.
Yeah,
and in Quillon. Yeah.
It's apparently a British thing because all the British people are like, oh, yeah, go down to your local Parchemin. And
so parchment. It looks like parchment.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it before, but in the U.S. it's the equivalent of a Goodwill store.
Right,
People donate their stuff and then they sell it, you know, for a good cause. I guess.
I learned a new thing. I've never seen one around Toulouse.
I've never heard, but they have one in Limoux anyway.
Excellent. Yeah, so that's good to know that furniture can be had at a decent price because shipping your furniture, but of course you kept your house in the U.S., so you wouldn't have had a big container to move, but big containers are very expensive and very slow. So very slow. So, you know, you have a swarm of people coming to pack your house for a day or however long it takes them, and then you're not going to see your stuff again for at least 3 months. So in the meantime, what do? You got to go somewhere, you know. So it feels like a long time anyway, even if they can do a little better than that. So
I've had a conversation with my wife about the fact that we are not doing that when we come over here.
Yeah. You can sell it over there, you know, or donate it or whatever.
We've had a conversation about a table that was my mother's and 2 other pieces of small furniture. And even then, I'm like, we're going to give it to our children at that point. We are not taking it with us.
Right. We've given stuff to family members and friends and stuff. You know, we knew we weren't going to need a snowblower in Toulouse. You know, so there's no need to bring the big old. It was one of these fancy snowblowers from Costco. You know, that has the lights and all of this and that, and we're like, yeah, no need.
Yeah, you'll need a broom once every 3 years.
Yeah, and then even that is for like half an inch. So anyway, so do you keep a car in Quillon?
I do keep a car, but I'm about to get rid of it because it runs me about $1,500 a year to own the car, and I only drive it 2 months out of the year. So when you consider the cost of insurance and the cost of repairs and all that, this year I'm going to park the car this year, and we're just going to walk around town and bike and all that we normally do. Because again, we made sure and was able to purchase the house for when we retire, so all these things were within walking distance.
Yeah.
And if we go somewhere, we're going to use the app Drivey to rent a car out of Limoux if we need to go somewhere further away.
Yeah.
Because I've decided that spending approximately $900 a month to drive a car in France, to own a car in France, when we only are using it 2 months out of the year.
It's silly.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But it took me a couple of years to finally figure that out.
Right. Yeah, and as car sharing becomes more kind of habitual, you might get to that point too.
When we started this, it wasn't even an option because the closest car on a car sharing app was in Carcassonne, which for us is about 45 minutes to an hour away. And there's only 3 connections a day between our city and Carcassonne. And back then they had the train. Now the train stopped because of the track conditions. Now we take a bus. But I'd have to get up at 5:45 in the morning, travel all the way to Carcassonne, rent the car, come all the way back, pick the family up, do what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
Them off, go back, and be able to catch the last train or bus out of Carcassonne. That's very problematic for us. So that's why we went ahead and bought the car. Now that more people are in the system, there's cars that are 15 minutes away for us now.
Yeah. No car rental agencies?
No car rentals agencies in Keon. That was not on our list. It probably should have been. But even if it was, there was.
Yeah, you never know. It comes and goes. I mean.
Yeah, luckily it's not. We aren't in a town that has one boulangerie and 15 little French women. There's a lot of towns like that, even around our place. There's a lot of towns where you're like, oh, it's beautiful, it's amazing. Came on north of here, Camon.
Come on, yes.
Is one of the belles of France, one of the beautiful villages of France. But I would not live there.
Yeah.
It's in the middle of nowhere. They have a boulangerie, but not much anything else. And that's one of the things that makes it beautiful is because it's been left behind.
That's true. That's funny that you mentioned that. We talked about Camon in a recent episode. By the time this one comes out, it'll be probably a month later. This one will be a month later. But Camon is gorgeous. But yeah, would you want to live there?
Oh, the bridge that goes into it, and the tree line, and it's just amazing, beautiful, and the chateau that's just right north of it that's been burned down. It just fascinates me. But anyway, it's just an amazing place. But I don't really want to live there.
Yeah. Too small.
Yeah, it's just.
You got to pick your size.
Yes. Some people may be perfect for it, but
yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been very informative, and I'm sure you're going to inspire people to, put their cash where their mouth is. Like you've been talking about this for years. Just buy one already. You can do it in a week. Come on.
Yes,
I'm impressed. That's amazing.
With the airfares being as low as they are, it does it for us. Coming to France or going to Yellowstone is about the same price.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's unbelievable. Well, have a wonderful time in France. Thank you so much for talking to me, and hopefully I'll get to see your beautiful home someday soon. I'll get to Keon.
Come on down and visit us. Have a wonderful one. Bonne journée.
Merci. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Thank you, Walter Anastavievsky. Oh, sorry about that, Walter. Peggy Duhamel. That one's easy, but it's French. But how would you say it in English? I don't know. Duhamel? Duhamel, it's a French name, and Charlene Bren for pledging to support the show on Patreon this week. And my thanks also to all the other patrons who support the show month after month. Thank you for giving back. I added a new reward for patrons this week, and this one is for anyone who joins at the $5 level. When you join Patreon, you will get invited to a secret Facebook group where I will answer your questions. The $50 tier is for people who want a full review of their itinerary on the phone with a detailed email to follow. But if you just want to ask a few questions from the Facebook group, the secret Facebook group is perfect for you. I used to do all of that in the Join Us in France closed group, but it's getting so big. I could spend my whole day answering questions, a lot of the time the same questions over and over again. And so I've decided I need to give back to my patrons and people who support the show and spend less time in well, it's not that ginormous. They're much bigger groups, but to me it's ginormous. It's pushing 4,000 people. So visit patreon.com/join us to do it already. Patreon, join us, no spaces or dashes. I'm still working on inviting everyone who's donated to the podcast one way or the other into the secret Facebook group. I'm grateful there has been many donations, and so it'll take another couple of weeks probably for me to invite all of these people. The secret group is going to stay quite small because, the people who have donated on to the podcast, they've had their trip, many of them. And so they're not interested in joining because by now they're preparing a trip to Greece or whatever the case may be. And so it's going to stay pretty small, and it's mostly going to have repeat visitors to France who listen to the podcast, which is exactly who I want to hang out with. This week, I also released a new reward for Patreon supporters. It's a pre-show recording chit-chat between me and Elise. We were talking about the women's soccer competition going on in France right now, the insufferable sexism that it has revealed, a few TV shows we like, and I can't remember what else, but it was just, a chit-chat before recording, and I hope you enjoy that. I am going to be experimenting with different rewards because anybody who donates at the $5 level gets all $5 rewards. You have to pick one when you join Patreon, but I give you access to all of them. So I might as well try new things, right? See what you like the best. And you know who else gets invited to the secret Facebook group? Folks who donate $20 or more via the Tip Your Guide button on joinusinfrance.com. It's a green button. And my thanks to Jose Rodriguez and Mino Saiki for doing just that. I've been watching the women's soccer game. It's been terribly hot, so I've had to spend a lot of time watering my garden and my flower pots, and usually you can get away with once a week, not with this heat. You got to do it every day. But they are hanging in. I'm going, we got to eat quite a bit of lettuce already from the garden, and I think tonight we'll have some yellow zucchini for the first time. It went from tiny to edible in like 3 days. It's unbelievable. As soon as it gets hot, the zucchini loves it. I just love this little garden of mine. I don't know why. If you are in France right now, let me give you 10 points to prepare you for the heat wave, or the canicule, as we call it in French. Number one, more and more places have air conditioning in France, but even if they do, understand that nobody keeps a room as cool as what you're used to in North America. Restaurants will have their air-conditioned room at 80 or 85 degrees, not the 70 degrees you might be used to. So dress accordingly. And yes, shorts are okay. Listen to episode 195 if you want to know more. Number two, if you are coming to France in June, July, or August, you should book accommodations with air conditioning. I know a lot of hotels say the walls are thick, you'll be fine. Yeah, that's fine for a French person who's never had air conditioning, and we're used to this. But for the rest of us, and that includes me, they say open the windows at night. And yes, it does cool off. During a heat wave, you'll go from 100 to 105 down to 90. Okay, so that's some cooling off, but it's not a lot of cooling off. And then also the bugs will come in because we don't have screens on windows in France. I have some at my house, but most houses don't have them. Most hotels don't have them. So, think about that. Number three, almost every year now in France, we get the first heat wave in June, then another one in July, and one more in August. So far, we haven't had any in September, but time will tell. Number four, when it's hot like that, you will want to spend most of your time indoors. Go to churches because they are naturally cooler year-round. Go to museums and drink twice as much water as you think you should. And really take it easy. Number five, overdoing it on the wine when it's hot like this will raise your blood pressure. Go easy on that stuff, even if you're on vacation. Number six, I say that because I've seen so many drunken tourists. So just mentioning it in passing. It's okay to drink when you're in a cool environment, not so much when you're going to go be in the heat. Number six, during a heat wave, it is to be expected that you won't cross so many things off of your list. Why? Because getting anywhere in public transportation is really difficult. Which leads me to number 7. Taking the metro in Paris on a hot day is torture. Only line 1, 2, 5, 9, and 14 are fairly comfortable because they are air conditioners, and that works most of the time. All the other ones, and there are many others, do not have any air conditioning. The RER to go to... the one to Versailles might have some air conditioning, but some of them don't have air conditioning either. And so, you can have 105 degrees in the car. It's awful. The buses are usually cooled, but you have to wait for them in the heat. So it makes transportation really difficult. And number 8, I'm not saying don't come to France in June, July, or August, but be smart. Plan indoors activities if you're in Paris or in another large city. Maybe take a taxi instead of taking the metro if you can afford it. Don't go cheap. A $20 taxi ride isn't worth you overheating and feeling like death. Number 9, if you're outside of large cities, plan activities that involve getting wet. Go to the Dordogne and book a hotel with AC and a pool. Then you'll be great. We have some we've tried and recommend on joinusinfrance.com under the resource tab. Number 10, and lastly, if you're going to be buying a house in France, look at those fabulous air conditioning splits. I guess they're called split units. We mentioned them on the show. They are really, really easy to find in France. They are a lifesaver in the summer, and you'll spend less on electricity overall throughout the year. So why not? Okay, about my GPS-aware tour, my editor had to take a medical leave for at least minimum a couple of weeks, he said. So they've assigned me a new editor, and she wants to review the whole thing, which I mean, it makes sense. So it'll delay things a little bit, but not too much, I hope. I will keep you posted on the release date, on the podcast, on social media, and the email list as well. In the last episode, Emily talked about, the last episode was about a honeymoon in Paris, and my guest Emily talked about creating a detailed, personalized Google map for her trip. And surprisingly, I had never tried to do that. I don't know why, I never tried. But a contributor to the Join Us in France closed group on Facebook called Krutika, I hope I'm saying that right, Krutika. She shared detailed steps. So let me tell you the steps, and I will put them on the show notes for this episode as well. So that's joinusinfrance.com/239. So you open Google Maps. So that's maps.google.com. You sign in. You have to be signed into Google. Then you click on the hamburger menu. It's on the left-hand side of the search bar. Okay? It doesn't look like a hamburger. It looks like lines on top of each other. Then you select your places from the drop-down. Then you select maps and you create a map. You give it a name. And now in each map that you create, and you can have as many as you wish, you can create layers, and those layers are where the magic happens. In one layer, you can put all the towns you want to visit if you're visiting, or all the streets you want to visit if you're in Paris. On another layer, you put the attractions you want to see. On another layer, you put down the restaurants or the hotels, whatever you're considering, ice cream shop, whatever you want. You can do layers for shopping, museum, parks, places to visit that have a nice view, whatever you want. It's, whatever tickles your fancy. And then you can preview it all on one big, beautiful map that will show you all of these things, and you can make them different colors and different shapes and stuff. It is awesome. I tried it. It's not that difficult. I don't know why I never did it before. So it's pretty cool. I think it's going to be super helpful. Thank you, Emily, for evangelizing and Krutika for helping out with specific steps. If you want to recommend the podcast to someone who already listens to podcasts, tell them they'll find Join Us in France anywhere they get their podcast. Just do a search. If they listen to music but not podcasts on their phones, tell them to search for Join Us in France on Spotify or Pandora. And if they don't normally listen to anything on their phones, then send them to joinusinfrance.com. There is a play button there for each episode. And thank you so much for listening and for spreading the word. That's going to do it for me today. Send questions or feedback to Annie@joinusinfrance.com. Have a great week of trip planning. Have a great time in France if that's where you are, or wherever you are really. And I'll talk to you next week. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2019 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.